What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're talking big name running backs that you should avoid for the 2021 fantasy football season. And as always, if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, let us hear it in the comment section, whether you agree, disagree, if there are names that we left off, and give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin to continue interacting with us there. But most importantly, go get yourself a copy of the 2021 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide, now available for purchase on alldaypigskin.com. Great price, everything you could possibly want. Top 150 overall player rankings, standard and PPR formats, individual player bios, projections, along with general fantasy football advice. All those details in the description. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Kicking off our list, we begin with David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. And honestly, Montgomery has been one of our top regression candidates at the running back position for a while now. And unfortunately, look, as good of a season as he had last year, and keep in mind, we were pounding the drum for him. He finished as the 4th overall running back in PPR scoring, 6th overall in standard, absolutely sensational. What you need to understand is that fantasy is a year-to-year type of game, especially in redraft. And just because Montgomery had a huge 2020 doesn't necessarily mean it'll translate into 2021. And there's a lot of reasons why. Let's start with the other running backs around him, because last year, Tariq Cohen gets injured early on in the season. So what does that do? Well, that puts Montgomery as a much bigger participant in the pass catching role at the running back position, because Tariq Cohen is one of the premier pass-catching running backs in the NFL. Now that he returns, well, that means that the pass-catching upside in terms of yards and receptions from Montgomery should go down. And that was a nice kind of little floor boost for him, especially in PPR scoring. But making matters even worse is the fact that the Bears signed Damian Williams from the Kansas City Chiefs, and Matt Nagy has that connection to the Chiefs. You know he likes to bring in former players, kind of bring in schemes and utilize them. And look, Williams isn't just a Cordero Patterson replacement. He's not this converted wide receiver, kick returner, punt returner. No, the guy was filling in for big name running backs for the Chiefs and instrumental in their playoff and Super Bowl appearances. So that is a big deal. He's a well-rounded running back as a pass catcher, as a rusher, and he'll probably take away opportunities from both Montgomery and Cohen, which means just lower volume for Montgomery, which is never a good thing for really any player in fantasy. Moving on, though, look at the strength of schedule. Last season, it was a night and day performance. Prior to the Bears, towards the end of the year, getting their cupcake schedule, when they played, no joke, like the 32nd, 31st, 30th, 28th, 27th ranked rush defenses, Montgomery wasn't doing all that good. It was really kind of inconsistent performances. He needed that help from just very porous rush defenses to allow him to put up those big numbers and catapult him as, a top 5, top 10 running back. Now, though, in 2021, the Bears aren't going to be playing necessarily those easy Houston Texan defenses, those Tennessee Titan defenses. They're going to be playing the NFC West. So that means the Rams, the 49ers, the AFC North, Steelers, Browns, Ravens. You get the picture. Yes, they are still in the NFC North, so they get to face the Vikings, the Packers, and the Lions twice a year. So that'll be nice, but outside of that, it does get a little bit worrisome. And then a couple more quick notes. The Chicago Bears offensive line, other than quarterback, which kudos to the Bears, they addressed, the offensive line was the next biggest issue. They draft Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State, but they decide to move him to left tackle, and that's a bit worrisome considering his position is right tackle, doesn't have a lot of experience there on the other side. So this offensive line might start off a little bit sketchy. And then last thing we want to point out is Matt Nagy is expected to take over or resume play calling duties offensively. Last year, when David Montgomery was used the best he has been so far in his career, Matt Nagy wasn't running things offensively. So now that brings into question, how will Montgomery be used in 2021? Will he be prioritized as much? It's all a big question mark. And the biggest thing here is, yes, some people have come around to David Montgomery not being able to duplicate those stats in terms of top 10 running back, but we're talking like not even top 15 running back, because all those factors we just mentioned, along with some quarterback instability for the Bears, it's going to be Fields, it's going to be Andy Dalton, we don't know. So we're probably looking at David Montgomery as a, fifth round selection at the running back position. We think he finishes close to or outside of the top 20 running backs. There's a lot safer running backs that we would rather take a chance on better teams with, coaching that we have more confidence in. So for that reason, we are staying away from David Montgomery. Next up, we have got Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders. And Jacobs was someone that finished again as a top 10 running back last year, 8th overall in standard, 8th overall in PPR. Finished with over 1,000 yards rushing, double-digit touchdowns, so not bad. But what did he have going for him last season? Well, one of the things was one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And we've said this for a while now. One of the biggest losers in free agency at the running back position was bar none Josh Jacobs, because that offensive line for the Las Vegas Raiders was absolutely pretty much dismantled. And now you've got a new unit there, guys that aren't necessarily familiar, and it's going to be a new situation, not only for the running backs, for the quarterback. There's all of a sudden, a big question mark at the offensive line, and we don't quite know that the Raiders did enough in the NFL draft to get it back to where it was last season. But one of the biggest reasons why we're kind of out on Josh Jacobs this year is the addition of Kenyon Drake in free agency. And it was kind of backwards. You would think a team that loses a lot of offensive line talent would retool that offensive line before adding another running back, but the Raiders did it backwards. And Kenyon Drake, look, yes, he kind of underperformed last season for the Arizona Cardinals, but the guy was, still right around that top 12 running back range, is at least in standard scoring, which is what Josh Jacobs is, by the way. He's not a big-time pass catcher. Last year, only 33 receptions. While Kenyon Drake, the Raiders have said they're going to use him more in the pass-catching department. But to Kenyon Drake's credit, the guy almost had 1,000 yards rushing last season. Pretty much only 100 yards less than Josh Jacobs, which means that volume-wise, this is going to be the most serious competition Josh Jacobs has ever had behind him. And we don't like that for a guy that was kind of touchdown dependent last season. Now you've got concerns about the offensive line. You've got concerns about the competition behind him. You've got concerns about him being a pass catcher, about the Raiders offense as a whole. Look, if the Raiders offense takes a step back, they're going to have to focus more on passing the football, not rushing the football. And again, that takes away opportunities for Josh Jacobs. So pretty much a guy that was, an early second round pick last season. Guy finished as a top 10 running back last season. Again, similar to David Montgomery, we are fading. We're not really even considering him in PPR formats. We would look at him probably value-wise 4th, 5th round, similar to what David Montgomery was. Continuing on, we have got Melvin Gordon of the Denver Broncos, and man, oh man, how quickly things changed, because at one point in free agency, we were saying Melvin Gordon could be a league winner. The guy has RB1 upside. Obviously, this was as a result of the Denver Broncos parting ways with Philip Lindsay. And Melvin Gordon did finish as a top 15 running back in 2020, 13th overall in standard, 14th overall in PPR scoring. The problem is, again, that Melvin Gordon role of him being the guy didn't last all that long, because here comes the NFL draft, and in the second round, the Broncos trade up. So this was a guy they really wanted, Javonte Williams, running back, who will essentially be the replacement to Philip Lindsay. And welcome back in town, running back by committee for the Denver Broncos. That's not what you want to see for Melvin Gordon. Volume is going to be cut big time, whether it's a 50-50 split or a 40-60 split. When healthy, Philip Lindsay was a thorn in the side of Melvin Gordon. You could argue the reason why Melvin Gordon had such a good season was Philip Lindsay missed some time, only played 11 games last year. But, assuming health, Javonte Williams, okay, you can make the case that to start off the season, since he's a rookie, he struggles a little bit, isn't given as much on his plate, and Melvin Gordon could carry your team during that point in time and be a good value piece. But what happens afterwards? What happens when Javonte Williams, kind of gets it going? And, the Broncos did trade up for him for a reason. The worst thing that can happen in fantasy football is with Melvin Gordon. Look, great. He carries your team in the regular season up until a point. Let's not pretend that it's going to be for the full regular season. But then once the fantasy football playoffs come, it could all be for nothing because usually that's what happens with rookie running backs. Javonte Williams was ranked as one of the top running backs in this year's draft class. And presumably he puts it together towards the end of the year, gets more opportunities there. That means Melvin Gordon becomes even more inconsistent just in time for the fantasy football playoffs. That is a nightmare scenario for any fantasy football player. And essentially with both these guys healthy, what that means is Melvin Gordon is probably going to be touchdown dependent. He's going to be inconsistent, very up and down, and it's going to be tough for him to put back-to-back, weeks of, 15-plus points, something like that. There's going to be weeks, where he's very frustrating, less than 10 points type of situation. The Denver Broncos also, they don't have the quarterback situation figured out. So that means if they struggle offensively, guess who's going to lose a lot of opportunities? The running back, a.k.a. Melvin Gordon, or even Javonte Williams. Doesn't matter. The point is, running back by committees are a death sentence in fantasy football. Melvin Gordon, even though he finished as a top 15 running back last year, we're not drafting him in the second and the third round. Again, probably in that fourth, fifth round range, and it's not going to be a guy that you can rely on week in and week out. So it's going to be a tough situation with Melvin Gordon in Denver. Next up, we have got J.K. Dobbins of the Baltimore Ravens. And I feel like we've said this a lot of times with the Baltimore Ravens, but when your best rusher on your team is the quarterback, that's going to limit the upside for whoever the running back on the team is. And yes, Mark Ingram is gone, so J.K. Dobbins is the RB1 in Baltimore. That's great, and that is valuable. And, we would still target him in standard scoring because he is much more valuable there, as he doesn't offer really much upside as a pass catcher. Last year only had 18 receptions. He was the 17th overall running back in standard and 24th overall in PPR. So you can see how different that is. But look, even in standard scoring, what you need to realize is that the Baltimore Ravens, they don't commit to one guy at the running back position. There's a reason why Gus Edwards just got paid and why he's a viable weapon there. Sure, the fact that Lamar Jackson is a rushing quarterback will open things up for the other rushers on this team in Dobbins and Gus Edwards, but there's going to be less volume. So that means you're relying on big plays, big runs, touchdowns, things like that. And if they don't come with limited volume, the floor is extremely low for J.K. Dobbins, for whoever the running back on this team is. And like I said again, Gus Edwards is no slouch. The guy had over 700 rushing yards last season. And one final thing we will mention here is that with J.K. Dobbins, well, the Baltimore Ravens have kind of expressed interest this year to becoming a little bit maybe more pass heavy. And if that happens, that means less volume rushing wise for everybody. And I mean, the Ravens, they added Sammy Watkins. They added Rashad Bateman in the NFL draft. They added Wallace in the NFL draft. So there's a lot of pass catchers there now all of a sudden. And if they become a bit more pass heavy team, again, the upside for all these running backs goes down. But look, to J.K. Dobbins' credit, out of all the names that we've mentioned so far and will mention, we would be most likely to draft him earliest. But again, in PPR scoring, we probably aren't touching him. He is too one-dimensional. In standard scoring, yes, but I would view him more as an RB2, mid to low-end RB2, where it's going to be a lot of inconsistent performances. You're praying for a high touchdown upside and for those big plays to come, those big chunk plays. And if they don't, then you're going to be in trouble, and it's going to be a lot more low-scoring weeks than high-scoring ones for J.K. Dobbins. Finally, we get to David Johnston of the Houston Texans. And honestly, here I could put the entire Houston Texans running back room because This is an absolute just mess. David Johnson is right now considered the RB1, but the Broncos, this free agency, have added Mark Ingram, Phillip Lindsay, and Rex Burkhead. In the meantime, we don't even know what's happening with Deshaun Watson. That's the elephant in the room. Look, if Deshaun Watson isn't playing quarterback for the Texans in 2021, you don't touch anybody on this offense. And we mean anybody, like no matter what the value you are getting. David Johnson isn't David Johnson of old, and even if he was, we wouldn't see it on this team. The Houston Texans are going to be one of the worst, if not worst, team in the NFL in 2021. The offensive line is a mess. Everything there is a mess. So right now, there's so much competition at the running back position. Yes, David Johnson was a big name. He's not that far removed from it. He's a great pass catcher as well. You know, the guy was a top 20 running back in standard scoring last season. He was 21st overall in PPR scoring, but man, look, he missed some time. It doesn't matter, guys. There's so many other running backs behind him. Ingram, Phillip Lindsay, like I said, Rex Burkhead as well. He's going to have much less volume. This offense is potentially going to be anemic, which means the running backs aren't going to be utilized as much. It's going to be a complete mess in Houston. And honestly, right now, like I said, substitute David Johnson with the entire Houston Texans running back room because that's how bad it is. No matter the round, no matter the scoring format, we just are not simply drafting David Johnson. For any running back on the Houston Texans, that is a death sentence right now. So we are staying away from Houston. With that, we conclude our breakdown of these big name running backs that you should avoid for the 2021 season with, regression, worries, etc. But as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree? Are there names that we left off? Do you feel better about some of these guys than we do? Let us hear it along with any other questions. If you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, check us out online at alldaypigskin.com, and get yourself a copy of the 2021 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide while you are there. Great value. It's got everything you could possibly want. Details in the description. And finally, give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin to continue interacting with us there. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.